Tonight, the Kremlin's #1 critic is dead. Alexei Navalny's death in a Russian prison draws widespread condemnation.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible.
We hold Vladimir Putin and the Russian regime responsible.
Donald Trump fined a staggering amount over financial fraud, being ordered to pay more than $500 million. A sample of bonded asbestos found at a second school in Sydney, while others await test results. The men's and women's Indigenous All-Stars kick off the footy season in winning style. And the reviews are in after night 1 of The Taylor Show. Good evening, Lydia Feng with ABC News. Russian President Vladimir Putin's most vehement critic, opposition leader Alexei Navalny, has died in prison. The 47-year-old's unexpected death has prompted global outrage and condemnation, with Australia's Prime Minister and other world leaders blaming President Putin for his death.
Seemingly well and joking with court officials. This is the last known video of Alexei Navalny alive. The jailed opposition leader was appearing in court via video link from a notorious prison in the Arctic Circle. He was serving a 30-year sentence for charges he and his supporters have labelled politically motivated. Hours later, he was dead.
He will probably be remembered as the best president of Russia that Russia will never have.
The prison released a statement saying he felt unwell after a walk and almost immediately lost consciousness and couldn't be revived. Global condemnation was swift and fierce.
Australia is shocked and saddened, and we hold Vladimir Putin and the Russian regime responsible.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
Alexei Navalny, очевидно, він убитий Путіним.
Obviously, he was killed by Putin, like thousands of others. Putin doesn't care who dies, as long as he retains his position.
From the Kremlin, a denial.
We are doing all the checks and clarifications. There is a certain set of rules that everyone is now following.
Alexei Navalny rose to global attention after exposing electoral fraud and government corruption during the 2011 parliamentary elections. In 2017, Navalny announced he was running for president against Vladimir Putin, but his candidacy was blocked. He continued to release dozens of investigations, exposing corruption at the highest levels of government. In late 2020, he fell critically ill after being poisoned by nerve agent Novichok at the end of a trip to Siberia. After recovering in Germany, he declared he'd return to Russia, despite warnings he'd be detained. He was, and since then he's been imprisoned on charges of extremism and fraud, sparking protests in the capital, Moscow. While coming as a shock to the world, Navalny knew his days were numbered.
My message for the situation when I'm killed is very simple: not give up.
As the news broke, foreign leaders were gathered for security talks in Munich. Navalny's wife, Yulia, was there and took to the stage.
I want Putin and his government to know that they will be held accountable for what they have done to our country, to my family and to my husband.
In Russian cities, supporters laid flowers for the Kremlin critic.
It's not good. Locked up, no freedom, no family, no wife. It shouldn't be like that.
But as night fell, police started arresting mourners. In London, supporters have turned out to the Russian embassy to pay their respects. Sadly, they've been here before. Alexei Navalny has been added to a long list of anti-Putin critics to pay the ultimate price for speaking out under his rule. His death leaves the country without a prominent opposition leader ahead of the presidential election next month, at a time when Vladimir Putin has amassed near unrivalled power. Catherine Diss, ABC News, London.
Donald Trump has been fined more than $500 million after a judge found he'd artificially inflated the value of his assets to receive financial advantage. It's a major financial blow for the man who's seeking to return to the highest office in the country.
My name's Donald Trump, and I'm the largest real estate developer in New York.
Donald Trump built his whole brand on apparent financial success and flashy displays of wealth. But today, a judge in New York ruled he'd been inflating the value of assets to gain financial advantage.
The scale and the scope of Donald Trump's fraud is staggering, and so too is his ego and his belief that the rules do not apply to him.
The punishment also staggering. Donald Trump to pay more than $500 million, and he's banned from carrying out business in New York for 3 years. His two sons, Eric Trump and Don Jr., banned for 2 years. But the judge also lashed them with his words, writing, "Their complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on pathological."
He needs to pay. You know, as a New Yorker, we always knew he was a fraud.
He got himself into this mess, and this deserved justice.
But in his Florida mansion, Mar-a-Lago, one of the assets he'd inflated the value of, Donald Trump wasn't backing down and says he will appeal.
You build a great company. There was no fraud. The banks all got their money, 100%. They love Trump. They testified that Trump is great customer, one of our best customers. They testified beautifully.
The incredibly stark and robust nature of the findings and the penalty are probably enough to trigger a real appeal at the state level.
Donald Trump's legal battles haven't derailed his political ambitions so far. He is clearly the leading candidate for the Republican nomination for president. But there is a live question about whether legal losses like today's will damage his standing with moderate and independent voters. But the more immediate concern for Donald Trump might be finding the cash in order to pay the fine. Carrington Clark, ABC News, New York.
Political tensions over Australia's border policy have reignited after a group of foreign nationals arrived in a remote Aboriginal community in northern WA. The ABC understands a third group have turned up following the discovery of more than 20 men near Beagle Bay on Friday.
On the move once again, after claiming to have arrived by boat from Indonesia. This bus, believed to be carrying more than 20 men towards Derby, 200 kilometres north of Broome, after the group spent the night in Beagle Bay. But as their journey continues, so do political tensions over Australia's border policy.
I ran Operation Sovereign Borders. I know exactly how these people smugglers work. They will react to a weak Prime Minister and to a weak Minister. And if they see vulnerabilities, they will exploit them. And that's exactly what has happened here.
The opposition taking the opportunity in the wake of last year's release of more than 100 immigration detainees following a High Court ruling.
The people smugglers see all of that and they market it. They're very savvy.
We do not seek to politicise national security issues, and it is unfortunate when any politician seeks to do so.
Advocates urging the nation's leaders to avoid a scare campaign.
This is about people, not politics. It's not about left, it's not about right. And my message to politicians and the general public is to remember that. People will flee whatever way they can if their lives or their family lives are in danger.
On the ground, it's unclear whether the men will stay in Australia or be transported overseas. But there are signs they might be due to leave.
This No Airlines plane arrived here in Broome on Saturday morning after stopping over at a Royal Australian Air Force base near Derby.
Australian Border Force has remained tight-lipped on any updates, despite reports another dozen men turned up late Friday. Roseanne Maloney, ABC News, Broome.
Satellite images show Egypt is building a wall and levelling land on the country's border with the Gaza Strip. The construction of a buffer zone comes as fears grow that an expected Israeli offensive could force 1 million displaced Palestinians to try and seek shelter in Egypt. The US has warned Israel against the offensive over concerns for the welfare of civilians. Israel says it has no intention of pushing Palestinians across the border with Egypt. Fleeing the war zone is proving to be increasingly difficult, but one family has just arrived in Sydney after managing to get out. They made the long trek without consular assistance and are among a relatively small number of Australian visa holders who have arrived from Gaza since the start of the war.
Safe, at last, the Dawes family has managed to escape Gaza, but at great cost.
We lost our dad due to the lack of medical care, so the price is much. So I cannot describe it. I cannot say it in words.
Mariam's father, Mohammed Dawes, was a journalist. The vulnerable 63-year-old succumbed to a stroke in late November after enduring weeks of Israeli airstrikes and the destruction of their home.
My one wish during the war was to come back to my home for one day, just to take the things dear to me, just the things I love. The house was bombed and everything is gone.
Just 2 days after Mohammed's death, they were granted Australian visas. But getting out was anything but simple, while hundreds of other Australian visa holders remain trapped in Gaza.
It's not complicated, it's impossible. You know, I have friends there, I have relatives, they cannot go out.
To escape from Gaza requires a valid visa to another country and for your name to be on the Rafah border crossing list. Since the beginning of the war, more than 2,500 names have appeared on these lists for the United States. There's almost 1,400 for Turkey and 260 for Australia. More than 2,000 Palestinian citizens have been issued Australian visas since the start of the war, but the number of arrivals is far less.
A spokesperson for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade said that the Australian government has so far supported 207 Australian passport and visa holders to leave Gaza, but it's understood that almost 100 more have made it here on their own.
After consular assistance for non-immediate family members was stopped in December, some have resorted to paying fixers and scammers, something the Australian government seemed aware of in an email addressed to another family. We do not know the details of how they have managed to do so, but it is a decision for you to make, whether you wish to attempt to depart. For those who do make it to Australia, their only support system is the local community.
When we knew that they were coming, we started building 2 cabins in my front yard, and I had to do everything by hand because it was a labor of love.
A safe haven for this family, who still fear the worst for their loved ones trapped in Gaza. Nabil Al-Nashar, ABC News, Sydney.
Mulch contaminated with asbestos has been found at another Sydney school, while more sites have been identified for testing. Leah Harris has the latest.
This inner Sydney school is one of several that's undergone testing this week. It's still waiting on a result, while the EPA has confirmed a Lambie Heights public school on the Northern Beaches has returned a positive test after a single piece of bonded asbestos was found in a garden bed. Remediation works are underway and the school will open as usual on Monday. It's the second public school to find asbestos in its landscaping after the hazardous material was found in recycled gardening mulch at Liverpool West Public School on Sunday. That school will stay shut for weeks. 2 new residential estates and a Millers Point Park have also returned positive results, taking the total number of contaminated sites to 32.
We've identified another 4 schools for priority testing, along with 2 other sites, being the University of Sydney and Sydney Olympic Park.
The wider EPA investigation into the source of the contamination is ongoing.
Sydney Harbour was once home to a thriving shipbuilding industry. Now many of those boat yards have disappeared, squeezed out by rising property prices. In the latest in our special Stateline series, we talk to one of the last of the harbour's working shipwrights.
Hi, my name's Michael Bartley. I'm a shipwright on Sydney Harbour, and this is the place that I love. We've seen a lot of the small yards disappear over the years. Property values have taken over and the small yards have packed up and moved out, so we're one of the last left now.
Michael has been building boats for almost 40 years. Visiting his boat yard on the Balmain waterfront is like stepping back in time.
Michael, hello. Nice to meet you. How are you, Jeremy?
Thanks for having us.
Nice to meet you. My pleasure.
This might be the best office in Sydney.
Yeah, it is, I think, yeah.
Fabulous.
It is. It's a nice little oasis.
So you're a shipbuilder?
That's right, yeah.
You've been doing it for a long time?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I did my apprenticeship over on Cockatoo Island back in the late 80s.
Right over there?
Right over there, yeah.
In all, the dockyard employs just over 2,000 people.
Shipbuilding on Cockatoo Island was in its heyday. Work was underway on the largest ship ever built in Australia, HMAS Success.
And watching the launching of that ship was something quite amazing, actually, to watch this 400-foot ship go down the hill at 15-odd kilometres an hour and hitting the water.
The training was old style. Apprentices had to learn to do everything by hand.
And we weren't allowed to use any power tools, so that's really set us aside from a lot of the other trades that are around these days.
There's less call for those traditional skills. Many of Sydney's oldest boatyards have shut up shop or sold out to developers.
Most of the boats are coming out of Europe these days, some out of Asia. Just can't afford to build boats in Sydney anymore. Would you like to step up and have a look?
Yeah, sure.
The majority of work coming in is maintenance and restoration.
So this was your classic Moreton Bay cruiser, built in the 1970s.
Dare I ask, how much did one of these things cost?
We don't talk about how much they cost.
I thought that might be the answer.
Yeah. Look, it varies. It can be anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million.
Who are your clients?
They vary. Average Joe through to ex-prime ministers,
right.
Millionaires. Just coming to have a look to see what you're up to. How's it looking up here? It's cleaning up pretty nicely.
He's passionate about handing down his knowledge to a new generation.
Is it rewarding to pass on those skills and make sure they live on?
Yeah, it is. I get a real buzz out of that. And my two main tradesmen at the moment have both done their apprenticeships with me.
A job and a place he never gets tired of.
What do you love about the harbour and coming to work at a place like this every day?
I've never really been more than about 5 kilometres from the harbour, and that's what makes it so special.
Taylor Swift has played in front of the biggest crowd of her career. 96,000 people filled the MCG for night one of her Australian tour, and fans say the pop superstar lived up to her reputation.
It's been a long 6 years for Australian Swifties. But last night, it was the world's biggest star who was left speechless on the first night of her Australian tour.
If I seem a little bit like I am losing my mind over the fact that there are 96,000 people here tonight, this is the biggest show that we have done on this tour or any tour I have ever done.
A look back at her glittering 18-year career and 10 studio albums, Taylor Swift's Eras tour stunned Melbourne's Friday night audience with chart-topping fan favourites, dazzling performances and non-stop spectacle, leaving fans buzzing.
It was amazing. It was the best thing ever. There was fireworks. Yes. It was just confetti everywhere. It was the best night. It was the best night. I love Taylor. So good.
There were nods to her Australian audience. A cover reveal to her forthcoming 11th album, and also songs never performed live before. Despite almost 100,000 fans inside the MCG, there were thousands more ticketless fans known as Taylorgaters outside, desperate to take part.
You know about me, but I bet you want to. Taylor Swift is my life. Yeah, totally. She's the best.
While last night was Taylor Swift's biggest show yet on the biggest tour in music history, tonight she gets to do it all over again. And with 6 more Australian shows to go, it looks like Swift fever is here to stay. Leanne Wong, ABC News, Melbourne.
Prince Harry has told a US television network the King's cancer diagnosis could bring the royal family closer together. Buckingham Palace revealed earlier this month that King Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer and would postpone public engagements as he underwent treatment. Prince Harry quit working royal duties and moved to the US in 2020. He says he jumped on a plane to the UK as soon as he heard his father was ill.
Throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. You know, the strength of the family unit coming together.
With Australia's high demand and lucrative street prices for methamphetamine and cocaine, it's a tempting target for crime syndicates. Because of its proximity, Papua New Guinea can often be a final leg as traffickers bring illicit drugs into Australia. But one route through remote Papua New Guinea is destroying lives and deeply worrying authorities. PNG correspondent Tim Swanston has tonight's special report from Daru Island.
This is the surprisingly narrow expanse between Australia and Papua New Guinea. Just 4 kilometres separates the two countries here in the Torres Strait. It's a remote part of the world, but it's recently come under increased scrutiny by police.
We are looking at the much bigger ones. Those drugs.
They're patrolling the maritime border, searching for a group of suspected drug traffickers.
The POIs are known for people smuggling and also known for transporting illicit drug across to Australia using their networks.
Just a few months ago, in the PNG village of Mabaduan, police found 5 kilograms of methamphetamine, allegedly destined for Australia. 6 people were arrested. With Australia's soaring demand for illicit drugs and high street value for methamphetamine and cocaine, it's a tempting target for transnational crime syndicates. That makes PNG vulnerable and one of the final stops in what's known as the Pacific Drug Highway. While it's not exactly clear how these drugs get to PNG, it's suspected they're trafficked in from Southeast Asia or South America. From the capital of Port Moresby, they can be driven along the coastline to Kerema. From here, dinghies transport all types of illegal items from Gulf Province across to Daru, one of PNG's few Torres Strait islands. From Daru, Australia's mainland is a short trip away.
From here you can see just how porous the Australian-PNG border really is. There's many villages on the southern end of Papua New Guinea here, and to get to the Australian side of the Torres Strait, to Saibai Island, it takes just minutes.
So it is that I wanted to say.
The presence of methamphetamine here is extremely concerning to local police and community leaders.
If there's a spillover effects on meth within Daru Island, we would certainly run to chaos.
In Daru, many here already work the black market. Harvesting sea cucumber is how many locals earn an income, but much of the trade is illegal.
They put me there at the border, Australian border, and I went for prison terms for 3 years. But I can't stop because there's no other means and ways for us.
It's this desperation to make a living that community elders fear turns people to the growing drug trade.
They are born fishermen, but these new things coming in, like drugs, they get involved because somebody bringing drug is coming with money.
Transnational Crimes Police, as well as customs officers, conduct patrols with Australian law enforcement, but it's a massive, expansive sea. Cracking down on the trade will require more economic opportunities for locals, meaning they're not vulnerable to being coaxed into working as traffickers.
The syndicates and those people who are actually involved in this thing has to look very carefully and see the effects that will have in the community.
The Indigenous All-Stars have kicked off the footy pre-season in style. Both the men's and women's teams won out over their Maori counterparts in Townsville.
Two proud and passionate cultures reigniting their rugby league rivalry once again. And it was the visitors who scored first.
Joey Tobin for the line. Oh, the Canberra powerhouse.
But Josh Adokar helped the Indigenous All-Stars respond not once, but twice.
Adokar's got a first quarter double.
Soon, Hamiso Tabuai Fido extended his side's lead, giving a nod to his totem in trademark fashion.
He's done it, the hammer. He squeezes through and scores.
Both sides traded blows in the second half, but the Indigenous team had done enough to prevail in Latrell Mitchell's first match as captain.
I didn't say too much. There's a lot of great leaders in our team, but I just think my presence was enough, and the boys just played footy and had fun. That was my clearest message: just play simple and back your abilities.
Earlier, Jillaroos centre Jamie Chapman set the women's all-star clash alight with 2 long-range tries.
And Jamie Chapman runs away to score her second All-Stars double.
As the Indigenous side secured their biggest win over their Maori opponents, 26 points to 4. Jessica Stewart, ABC News.
South Africa has dug in to frustrate Australia on the third day of the women's test in Perth. The hosts started the day needing 7 wickets for victory, but struggled to take them.
After a dominant day 2 where Australia built a 499-run first innings lead off the back of Annabelle Sutherland's double century, the hosts went into the weekend looking to wrap up a big test win. But the Proteas had other ideas.
Enjoys the pull shot.
Delmi Tucker and Tasman Brits frustrating the bowlers despite uncomfortable conditions.
In the right areas.
They offered chances, but the host couldn't make them stick.
Oh, it's gone in the air. Tracking back, King, it's just out of reach.
As Tucker brought up a defiant half-century following a first innings golden duck.
She gets it around the corner, and that will be a 50 for Delmi Tucker on debut.
Australia toiled without reward until Elise Perry finally broke through, but even that was a close thing.
Thank you. If we just go frame by frame here.
Chloe Tryon took the fight to the Aussies as she raced towards a half-century.
It's a natural game.
But the scoring dried up as the bowlers cranked up the pressure. Elisa Healy twice narrowly missing a stumping. Tucker's resistance was eventually broken thanks to Ash Gardner, bringing to an end an excellent innings on 64. The floodgates threatened to open as Gardner struck again.
That's a great catch. Annabelle Sutherland, she can do no wrong.
The new ball saw the quicks return and Darcy Brown struck.
It's played on.
Tryon refused to throw her wicket away, posting a hard-fought half-century as South Africa made Australia work for victory. Tom Wildey, ABC News.
A street in Canberra had quite the surprise visit this morning with a hot air balloon making an unscheduled landing in a back garden. Residents of this street rushed to help, trying to grab the ropes as the balloon bounced on rooftops, avoiding nearby power lines. After failed attempts to land in the street, the pilot managed to manoeuvre into a tight space in this backyard. Miraculously, no one was hurt and there was only minor damage to gutters and an aerial. Now let's take a look at the weather. It was a hot and humid day across Sydney today. It reached a top of 31 in the city and 34 in Penrith. Overnight lows ranged from 13 to 26 degrees across the state. Maximums were generally in the 30s. Ivanhoe hit 39 degrees. On today's satellite, ex-tropical cyclone Lincoln has moved inland along the border of the Carpentaria and Barkly districts of the Northern Territory. On tomorrow's chart, windy and humid conditions sweeping from the southeast to northeast of the state is expected to persist through to next week. Around the country tomorrow, partly cloudy in Melbourne, Perth and Hobart, mostly sunny in Brisbane and Adelaide, storms in Canberra. For the northeast, partly cloudy with the chance of morning fog. In the southeast, scattered showers and isolated storms, dry and mostly sunny in the far west, but a chance of showers and storms in the far east in the afternoon and evening. Off the coast, winds 10 to 20 knots, seas 1 metre. In Sydney tomorrow, partly cloudy, the chance of an afternoon storm in the west, a top of 29 in the city and 32 in Penrith. The sun will rise at 6:31. And further ahead, a high chance of showers and storms Monday to Wednesday, partly cloudy on Thursday before a very hot day on Friday, a top of 34 in the city and 37 in the west, then a shower or 2 on Saturday. And that's all from ABC News. Enjoy the rest of your evening.